Good morning, Rev'd Julie here from St Mark's Church with this week's reflection on the Gospel reading for today, which is from Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 to 35. A banana went to the doctor. "Doctor, doctor," he said, "I'm not peeling very well." "Doctor, doctor, sometimes I feel like a teepee and sometimes I feel like a wigwam." The doctor replies, "Relax, you're just too tense." Why am I telling you these jokes? Well, partly because I was told them in the week and they made me chuckle, and I accepted a dare to include them in my reflection. But also because life has been and continues to be on the serious side, and sometimes having a bit of a laugh can keep us going. This week we have been reminded that we are still navigating stormy times. The COVID-19 cases are on the rise, and the government has introduced their Rule of Six as a means of steering the nation through stormy waters. And do you know what is essential for a successful journey? Ballast. Heavy materials placed in the very depths of the hull to give the ship stability and control, and includes seawater. The substance that could cause the ship to capsize is also used to ensure its trim, its stability, and its structural integrity. In my opinion, Matthew chapter 18 is made up of ballast teaching. As Karen said last week, we are in a section of Matthew's Gospel where we are given practical examples of how to be a follower of Jesus, how to put his teaching into everyday use, including the difficult stuff. Taking on board sufficient materials to ensure we stay afloat and on course through the storms and destabilizing turbulence, the winds and the waves of what surrounds us. Our master guide and teacher is none other than Jesus, who leads by example and teaches from his heart of grace and mercy. This week we are asked about the ballast in our lives that is called forgiveness. How much forgiveness is it good to carry to keep us stable and under control? Please turn to the reading and see that the first verse gives us the context. Peter steps forward and says, and I paraphrase, "I think I've got this. If my brother does me wrong, steps over the mark, owes me one, then shall I forgive him not just the once, but as many as 7 times?" I wonder if Peter genuinely thought he'd got this teaching on forgiveness sussed. He'd heard the teaching about reconciliation and restoring relationships within the church family, and he had thought about it. The Jewish rabbis taught that to forgive someone any more than 3 times was unnecessary. Peter has been around Jesus long enough to know that he usually turns the law on its head. So when Peter offers to forgive the one who had wronged him 7 times, over twice what was required, perhaps he expected special commendation from the Lord. When Jesus responded that forgiveness should be offered 499 times, far beyond that which Peter was proposing, it must have stunned the disciples who were listening. Although they had been with Jesus for some time, they were still thinking in the limited terms of the law rather than in the unlimited terms of grace. Is that like us? Have we also been around Jesus a long time and yet still need to hear his message of unlimited grace? Is our supply of forgiveness ballast running lower than the recommended level? Jesus' message of grace says that forgiveness is not something we do and count. Rather, it is ballast to our very way of being. It is a lifelong approach to others and involves the growth of a forgiving heart that matches the character and heart of God. Not only that, but we are to forgive with the same grace the 1000th time as we do the first time. Anyone else feeling this is a bit of a tall order? The story that Jesus then told reminds us to follow the King and not the servant. In the kingdom of heaven, it is the example of the King that is important, and this King writes off an unaffordable debt out of compassion and mercy. His actions to forgive the debt are incredible, unexpected, and undeserved. They have a liberating impact on the debtor's life. The King takes on the costs of his servant's unsurmountable debt. Let's not beat about the bush. This act of compassion is very costly to the King, but shows such heart and character that we expect the servant to be motivated to do the same. And that's where the twist in the story comes. The servant is liberated, but does not take on board the substance of the forgiveness he has received as ballast. He is not motivated to change. He has his debt forgiven and then forgets. In failing to forgive the brother who owed a small amount, he commits a greater and far graver sin against the King. And when he is called to account yet again, this time the King remembers and reminds the servant of the full extent of the debt he owes, which now includes his complete lack of mercy, as we read in verse 33. To be a follower of Jesus involves practical, hard-hitting, and costly decisions that take us deeper into the zone of grace and further into the compassion and mercy of the Lord. Jesus teaches us that forgiveness is not to be meted out in a limited fashion, but is to be abundant, overflowing, and available to all, just as the measureless grace of God is poured out upon us. It is also to be taken on board, internalized for our own health and well-being, our own stability in the inevitable storms of life. Be encouraged today to follow the way of the King. As daily we receive God's forgiveness, mercy, and compassion, so now we are to go to share forgiveness, mercy, and compassion with others. In the coming week, watch out for God-given moments to put this teaching into practice, for they will surely come. Amen.